Working Fans Podcast. Cool.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coming down 3, 2.
Welcome back for another week of the Working Fans Podcast. This is AJ. I'm the former wrestler. We've got Dave, the ultimate fan, here with us. As we do every week, our producer Joe likes to make us sound good and makes us look way more professional than we actually are. As always, you can find us on Twitter, that's @FansWorking, Facebook, Working Fans Pod. We've got email where you can reach out to us and please contact us to let us know what you think of the podcast and for any ideas that you might have. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram where you can keep up with us at workingfanswrestling_pod. And then you can now listen to us on all major platforms, including Anchor.fm. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, and you can actually check us out on YouTube. Now, it's important when you go onto the Apple Podcasts and YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a rating, let us know what you think so you can help us out and we can continue to do what we love and bring you guys in as fans.
Welcome back for another week of the 531, where a bunch of us take our top 5 list, put it together, debate it down to a top 3 list, and from there we get to a top 1. Now, this week's topic is from Jesse in New Hampshire, and he threw out the top 5 never were NWA champions. Now, I'm going to kick this off because I got number 1 on my list, Jerry Lawler. Number 2, Roddy Piper. 3, Arn Anderson. 4, Hulk Hogan. And Greg Valentine is my number 5. Adam, who's on your top 5 list?
This was easy for me. This is something I've thought about night and day for 43 years. To me, Roddy Piper's got to be in your top 5. If he's not, then shame on you. Another big one who doesn't get heard of quite as much these days, maybe because some people think he was racist and a Klan member, but Dick Murdoch was actually a hell of a worker and an incredible wrestler, even if he wasn't a good human being. And he really should have had a run with the with the NWA title because, quite frankly, he could work a great match with anybody. Another one that I absolutely love, we're going to stick with the Dicks here to make Dave happy. We're going to go with Dick Slater.
Yeah.
Dick Slater, believe it or not, when he was a younger wrestler, was absolutely tremendous, and the heat that he garnered when he was in Florida, Georgia, the Mid-South, he garnered heat, and at one point in his career, believe it or not, later on they would call him Dirty Dick, which now I think is Tony Schiavone.
Yeah.
But early on in his career, they called him Mr. Excitement because you never knew exactly what he was going to actually do and how he was going to go a little bit crazy. The fact that Tommy Rich had a world title and that this gentleman did not, to me, is an absolute shitfest. The other ones that we're going to talk about is, I actually agree with Joe. To me, Greg Valentine, with his work rate, would have been a tremendous World Heavyweight Champion. He did not have a great personality, but to me, he was Chris Benoit before Chris Benoit. He could have a great wrestling match. It was hard-hitting. When he chopped somebody or when he dropped that forearm on somebody, there's a reason why they called him the Hammer.
I thought you were going to say he killed his family, but okay.
No. His dad did enough of that himself. Shame on you, Johnny Valentine. Another one who I think doesn't get mentioned these days, which is sad, and I know that's easy because most people, when they hear NWA champion that wasn't crowned, are going to automatically go Magnum TA. But to me, I went Bruiser Brody. I think Bruiser Brody as a heel NWA heavyweight champion would have been absolutely incredible. I think that he would have been that monster that faces could have went after and really could have attacked, and they would have always been the underdogs. So, Dave, what do you got for us?
All right, I got a pretty decent list, I think, here. First off, I want to state that the one thing we said before we did this was we wanted wrestlers who competed in the NWA, given the time period. So that's why if anyone reads this, The Rock didn't make the list. Stone Cold Steve Austin was in WCW. That guy didn't make the list. Given the time period, and some of the NWA time is a little sketchy because obviously we know about the pride of the National Wrestling Alliance days, but then it would get broken up in different pieces here and there. So hear me out. So number 5 on my list, Kevin Von Erich. Kerry Von Erich got a run with it after his brother had passed away, and they put the belt on the Von Erichs for a little bit at the Parade of Champions. Kerry had the look. But at the end of the day, for me, bell to bell, Kevin was the best performer in the ring. Not that Kerry couldn't go, but nobody was touching Kevin as far as I'm concerned. Number 4, the only reason why this guy probably wasn't NWA World Champion because he was in a group with Ric Flair. And I'm not picking Iron Anderson, who's well qualified. I'm talking about Tully Blanchard.
Oh, I know who you're going
Yeah, Tully Blanchard was a mega heat getter and honestly could have led the Horsemen just as easily if there wasn't a nature boy Ric Flair. So Tully Blanchard's my number 4. My number 3 guy was the guy who was at WrestleMania 1 main event. And I'm not talking about Roddy Piper. I'm talking about Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff. Here's a guy that went into main events with Hulk Hogan. He was as tough as they come, and he's a guy, I think, with his persona, could have been a great NWA champion. As I said earlier, sometimes the NWA history was a little sketchy. For instance, there was a time, and we discussed this before we went on and to record this, Barry Windham was considered the NWA heavyweight champion. I believe he won it in a vacated tournament match against the Great Muta, and he was going to be the NWA champion while in WCW. So WCW had their heavyweight champion and the NWA heavyweight champion. Now, eventually Barry lost his belt to Flair, and Flair was about to have a match with Rick Rude, but Rick Rude and Flair never competed for the NWA title because the actual board of the NWA sued WCW over the name, and there was an issue with it. So they had to change the name to the International belt. So Rick Rude won the International title with the help of Fifi the Maid, Flair's future wife, and he never actually was NWA champion. So number 2 on my list is Ravishing Rick Rude, who was probably hours away of being the NWA heavyweight champion, and severely, Rude's run in WWE is awesome, but his run in WCW, it's unfortunate that it wasn't at a time period when WCW was winning in the ratings, because Rude was an outstanding heel. But my number 1, he was on both your lists. I just want to get this out real quick. I know you agree with me on Rude, because I know you're a Rude mark. You're probably thinking you should have put Rude, but that's all right. Rowdy Piper is my number 1, because to me, Piper is the ultimate heel, basically the number 1 heel of all time. And when you look at his resume, it's almost crazy he didn't have the NWA belt. But anyway, that's my list.
All right, and Jesse even sent us in his list too.
Nice.
So Jesse's list included Jerry Lawler, Chris Adams, Magnum TA, Arn Anderson, and David Von Erich.
Huh.
Now moving on, Piper, he was pretty much across the board. He was on 3 of our lists, so he automatically moves on. And the other ones, it's going to be a little tough to pick. So I'm going to put a couple names together, and we're going to pick versus some face-off.
I like the listeners' list. It's a great list. David and Magnum, to me, are very hard to move on. This is just my opinion. The reason why they're hard to move on for me is because they weren't stopped short because they never got in their career. They were stopped short by tragedy. Because both of them, I think, would have held the belt if they had been given the opportunity to, or if they didn't overdose and die in a car accident. Or not die in a car accident, but get severely injured in a car accident.
All right, well, I mean, you made the first face-off pretty easy because I was going to put Jerry Lawler versus David Von Erich. I think Lawler's a big name because he did hold the AWA title, but he never made that move over to the NWA title. So I'm going to have him move on. You got Piper, Lawler. Who else amongst the list stands out? I had a Brody versus Greg Valentine face-off.
For me, you know what, Adam? When I look at your list, the one guy I was a little upset I didn't put in there besides Magnum, which we kind of talked Magnum because of his career, was Brody. And the one guy I feel really strongly about my list is Rick Rude.
I was going to say, on Dave's list, I had a similar thing with Tully. Tully to me was Shawn Michaels before Shawn Michaels was Shawn Michaels. Okay. I think he was that good of a heel. Rick Rude is upsetting to me, but to me, he's that guy who you can put on the list of to just never hold a world title. I mean, other than winning the world class title, which was pretty much irrelevant by the time he won it, he was never given that world title strap.
So let me ask you this before we move on one matchup. As I see Joe's looking at Rude versus Brody. I'm reading that right? Yeah, Rude versus Brody. I would just like your opinion, just a little debate here, because we talked about Lawler, and Lawler, I agree, is the man. But what about Lawler and Blanchard? Who would you pick in that one?
I would pick Blanchard, and I'm going to tell you why. very simple. Jerry Lawler made the decision when he had his own company to stay primarily in his own company so that he could, for years and years, be able to put himself over and put title and title on himself. And he made the decision not to go and spend long, extended periods of time in other organizations. Even when he won the AWA title, it's because they were merging and trying to work together with the USWA. Nothing Jerry Lawler ever did was outside of his comfort zone.
I'm going to say I agree a little bit. Even though I think Lawler's an amazing heel and one of the best of all time, he kind of chose to be a big fish in a small pond. I would better see Tully move on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Tully did the opposite. Tully actually left his father's promotion because he wanted to go and wrestle in places where he would be challenged and where he wouldn't be that big fish in the small pond.
But what about Rude versus Brody? That's a tough one for me.
Okay, so here's why I would go with Rude. The reason why I would go with Rude is because Brody, similar to what happened with Von Erich and with Magnum, unfortunately was killed short. So we don't really know where his career would have gone. There is talk that he was slated to go to WWE and face Hogan. There's all kinds of talk. But he's another one who, what caused him problems was himself. He actually never wanted to sign on the dotted line. He was that original free agent who literally would never sign on necessarily with the NWA or WWE, or he wanted to be able to go to Japan, be able to go to Puerto Rico. He never wanted to be in that one place, and that's what I think cost him the title.
Good point. I mean,
so I would go Rude.
All right, I'll take Lawler off the list. So we're looking at Piper, Tully, and Rude for our top three. From that top three, who's the first to go out?
Oh God, Tully, Rude, and Piper.
That's a tough one.
Oh, this one's not going to make me popular. Out of those three, the worst work rate, and the one who I think would have been, even though he's got the best mic skills of all time, Piper's work rate in the ring is nowhere near the level of the other two wrestlers. And one of the things about being an NWA champion, and this is what we're forgetting, when you look down the list of NWA champions, and you look at your Jack Briscoes, you look at your Ric Flairs, you look at your Harley Races, you look at your Dory Funk, Terry Funk. The reason why they were all NWA champions is because they could go into any town on any night and wrestle anybody for 60 minutes. And I'm not saying Piper couldn't wrestle some people for 60 minutes, but Piper could not just have a great match with everybody. Whereas Tully and Rick Rude, you put them anywhere at any time. Can you remember bad matches? I mean, Rick Rude made the Ultimate Warrior look good.
Yeah, it's interesting because to me, Piper was the best heel of this group, and that's saying something. I want to say that clear because that is not me shortchanging the other two as heels. Work rate, though, man, I'm going to kind of agree a little bit because work rate was what the NWA prided itself on, right?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be work rate because...
Well, it's a combination to me.
Yeah.
Because look at Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes was a great performer, maybe the greatest babyface of all time. But how much actual time does he have as an NWA champion? You can fit his 3 reigns in 2 months.
Okay.
I have no problem making this down to Rude and Tully.
Rude and Tully?
Yeah.
All right, we'll take Piper off the list. I personally would have moved Tully out first, but...
I do want to be clear. I'm not moving Piper out because I don't think he's the biggest star of the 3.
Oh, no.
If there's a contest between the 3 of them as to who's the biggest star,
that's right, Piper.
If you ask me, because all 3 of them competed in the WWE, if you asked me who would have been the one who deserved the WWE title the most, I would have told you Rowdy Piper.
Mm-hmm. But based on what we consider the NWA to be and the merits of the NWA, the other two fit that a little more, I would say, yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so now we're down to Tully and Rude. Who do you pick between the two?
I'm going to start off here. This is razor thin, but at the end of the day, for as far as I'm concerned, there is not a more complete wrestler than Ravishing Rick Rude. Tully is amazing at what he can do bell to bell, but Rude can do all that stuff too, and he has a power game, and he's got a different look that nobody ever had in his business. There's not anybody with the lean bodybuilder type physique that Rude had and can go as well as he did in his prime. That's my opinion.
Rude's got the best physique of all time. I've never seen anything like it. That's why it was hilarious in the WWE when they would have him versus the Ultimate Warrior in a pose down, because you could tell that Vince just loved the guys that were huge instead of paying attention to the fact that frickin' Rick Rude was just muscle on top of muscle with about 0% body fat.
So who you picking?
Oh God, between these two, I think that Tully's a better all-around heel. He just had that, I walk into a room, you want to punch him in the face. But Rude, to me, like yourself, is the total package. I'm sad, to be honest with you, that Rude never got the chance to go face. There was talk about him actually going up against Vader when he got injured with Sting and turning face.
He actually attacked Vader with a chair.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen a babyface Rick Rude. Can you imagine how great that would have been? To me, I give it to Rude, and I think that one of the saddest things in my lifetime, other than maybe Mr. Perfect, is the fact that Rick Rude never got a real world title.
All right.
Wow, so yeah, Rude's going to win this week. And I want to thank Jesse from New Hampshire for this subject and this list. And we'll have to have him on in a future episode because he is a father. And I kind of wanted to talk with him about if your son's into wrestling, how do you, will you let him get into it? What kind of restrictions do you have? So we're looking at Jesse as a hopeful future guest. But thank you for joining us this week, and we'll see you guys later.
See ya.
I think that went well.
Guys, thank you for listening to the 531 here on YouTube this week. If you like what you hear, you can always find us on Anchor FM, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and on the Apple Podcast where you can subscribe and also give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate you listening. We want your feedback, 531, and if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, we also want you to let us know. And let us know what your 531 would be. Come up with a top 5 and let us know, and we'll tell you why you're wrong. And in order for us to do that, please contact us on Twitter. We're at Fans Working. Facebook page, Working Fans Wrestling Pod. Email workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. It's very important that you actually contact us on these platforms because we want this to be your interactive place to talk wrestling.